Karen Reed is back in the news. Apparently, they're going to try her case again. Greg, tell us about the videos we're going to watch.
Well, Karen Reed is on trial again. I believe the opening remarks were today or sometime this week. They just seated the jury. This is the first real interview we've seen. In our first time of reviewing her interviews, we were watching very small clips, and all of us were on the fence at the end. So let's see if this changes anything.
3 years have now passed since John's death. How much do you think about him with everything else that is going on?
I think about him in terms of his final days, his final weeks. I mean, we have his cell phone, which a cell phone to anyone is like a diary, and it tracks everything you've done. And I've gone over and over his final movements, his heart rate, his injuries, the time that he did everything that day and the days leading up to it. But I've said this to other people. The time that I spent with John, 2 years, it's now been 3 since he's gone, since he was killed. And I'm a year beyond. I've eclipsed the time that I spent with him. And I have very mixed feelings, when I look back on John, because I see a lot of poor decisions that were all precursors to his death and to this nightmare that I'm living. It's
Poor decisions by whom?
by both of us. Just drinking, being around the wrong people is chief among them. Wrong people for the weeks leading up. They wouldn't have been people I would have chosen on my own to be around.
All right, Chase, what do you got?
Let's go through the statements she's made here. She's saying we have a cell phone. I've gone over his final moments, heart rate, all this stuff. So instead of reflecting emotionally on John, she jumps into the facts. And I think that can signal maybe coping. So a lot of us process grief through logic. Could be strategic framing, just like staying objective to look super credible here. Could be distancing here, like emotionally separating from guilt or trauma. But there's also this. She's been charged with murder. And for over 2 years, her life has been about building a defense. And I think that kind of really nonstop pressure just hardwires your focus and makes you kind of obsess over data, inconsistencies, timelines, facts, and all that stuff. And I think that can suppress emotion, and it shifts our communication into like evidence mode. But she's also saying, I spent 2 years with him, and now it's been 3 since he's gone. That's not just a statement. That's a mental benchmark for her. So it helps her rationalize that emotional shift. And she says, I have these mixed feelings. I see a lot of poor decisions. That's not typical for somebody reflecting on a partner's death. So most would soften or idealize in this instance, but she critiques both of them together, which signals maybe some lingering resentment, some need to reposition some blame there. But then she shares the blame. This poor decisions by both of us. This is a self-inclusion, but she's normalizing that behavior. And she kind of concludes by saying there weren't people I would have chosen on my own. This is what I would personally call a soft denial of agency. She's not owning the choices, kind of dissociating, pushing away from those things right there. So if somebody's spent years fighting for their freedom, their focus usually narrows to facts and strategy. Keep that in mind. If you're ever talking to somebody and they seem really cold and clinical, calculated, if they've been through something like that, that might be what's going on. So truthful or not, that pressure can reshape how somebody talks in almost any situation. And in high stakes interviews, it might just be survival mode instead of some kind of cold, feelingless robot. That's all I got. Scott, what do you got?
All right. I want to propose this interesting thing about this invisible box she sits in, because she doesn't move 4 inches from one side to the other this entire interview. I mean, there are sometimes she does move a little bit, but she doesn't come out of this little invisible box she's sitting in. Her elbows never leave that the armchair or the arms on her chair as she's doing these nominal illustrators. They're not very big at all when she does. So I think she's talked to this attorney. She's locked down because remember we saw that one clip where she was talking about people are going to be watching my body language. I've been reading about that and studying about body language because she thinks people are watching her like us. So and like the panelists. So we'll make decisions from seeing that. So I think she's really focused on that. And that's why she's sitting relaxed in the chair like that, because she's got to get a spot where she can sit and stay. So she's not throwing off cues, although she does throw some off, which we'll all talk about here as we go along. So I think it was really interesting at the beginning of this, and we'll see how she is at the beginning compared to the end, especially with this invisible box. As she's talking, in this part, she's breaking up her sentences and they're coming out and because she's structuring her answer as she's answering it. Later on, we can tell which ones she's not structured because she doesn't know or hasn't assumed that the question may come up because they just come right out. So that's really interesting. So I think this is a great little baseline video for us, even though it's a few minutes into the big video. But I think it's really good because we're going to be able to see the differences in how she's acting at the beginning and at the end because they're really different. So I think those are all for me the most interesting parts of all that. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, look, I mean, there's all kinds of reasons. I don't think you're wrong, by the way, Scott, but there's all kinds of reasons why somebody might not have a lot of movement. Like I don't see a lot of movement in the forehead throughout this baseline. I would say there's a lot of asymmetry that's stuck in the face there. That can be all kinds of things. It can be a physical disorder. It can be an affective disorder. It could be a personality disorder. All kinds. It could be drugs. Could be all kinds of things. And we need just a lot more information. And we may get some of that from the videos that we watch going through this. But there's all kinds of reasons. And yes, one of them, Scott, it could well be that somebody said, hey, really kind of knuckle it down and tighten it down here. Because she's not wrong, because people are watching her, aren't they, Scott? I mean, here we are. Like she's right from moment one on that one. Listen, we're the behavior panel, which means we're not just looking at body language, we're looking at paralanguage and language. We're looking at what people say and everything around what people say. I mean, everything we possibly can, the culture that they're in, what clothes they might be wearing, the situation, the time. I mean, everything, what they're saying, what they're not saying, the gaps and the things that are there. So we'll be covering as much and everything as we can. She says, I think about him in terms of. So she's already, in my mind, negotiating, framing, hedging, reframing for us, how this person should be thought about, or how we need to think about how she thinks about these things. It does seem quite, as you were saying, Chase, does seem quite analytical. And that might be for all the reasons that you put forward. And it could be professional. She spends a lot of time in an analytical environment. She's maybe that kind of person. I mean, like you say, Chase, I think as we go on further, we'll find out more about that. Here's what I do know for sure in terms of the body language is we're not seeing a lot of movement, but her eyes open wide as she says, a lot of poor decisions that were all precursors to his death and the nightmare that I'm living. And the eyes open wide. And for me, Scott, they're kind of like her illustrator gestures. There's not much else happening, but she is going to illustrate, I think, with the wideness of those eyes there. And she says, being around the wrong people. So she's already setting up a way of thinking about her partner, her ex-partner, and some reasoning, a culprit, something that's somebody who's gone wrong or why it went wrong, being around the wrong people. Now, are we going to find out about these people, what was wrong about them? Because there's a lot of hedging going on here. So will we get any real information about this? Greg.
At the behavior panel, our goal is to help you see behind the surface, to spot deception and analyze the true intent behind people's words. It is a mission that I personally feel strongly about, especially in today's bias and overwhelming media landscape. And mainstream media tends to blur the truth and make it really hard to see through the chaos. This is why all of us are proud to have Ground News as a sponsor. They help readers look beyond the mainstream narratives and uncover the patterns in the way that today's news really spins and frames the issues that are going on, or even just fails to cover them in the first place. Like they don't even talk about it. So for every story that you read on their app or their website, you get instant access to every outlet that's reporting on that thing. On top of that, there's a breakdown of each source's political bias. For instance, you get this report of how subjective their reporting tends to be, and if they're independently owned, or they funded by corporations or governments, or are they getting their money from somewhere that's influencing what they're saying to you. So Ground News really helps you see the subtle ways that the media can very heavily shape our public opinion. I'm not even immune to it after studying all this psychology stuff, and it's good to be able to see behind the curtain. I'm actually in the process of writing a book. It's almost done on media brainwashing. And I think they're one of the most practical solutions that I have ever seen. So check it out by scanning this QR code or go to ground.news/TBP. Our viewers get 40% off unlimited access, whether you subscribe for yourself or if it's a gift for somebody. Ground News is independent and subscriber funded, not by any special interests. So by subscribing, you're not only just getting a great product, you're directly supporting our work here at the Behavior Panel.
What do you think?
Yeah, so a few things, and we're all on the same page, but I always say a fish tastes like what it swims in. She's an analyst for Fidelity is what she did for, and a professor and a teacher of that. Well, guess what? That makes you take facts and come to conclusions, which is exactly the way she's talking. I would expect her to do that. And I agree with you, Mark. She uses her eyes and her head to illustrate a lot. And when we say illustrate, we mean a person is punctuating their thoughts with their movement. And watch her eyes, watch her head bobbing, watch all that. One of the more interesting ones, and I'll walk back through this here in just a second, but one of the more interesting ones for me is I do believe she's had Botox or something done to her forehead because she has very little wrinkling. But at one moment, at a specific moment, when she feels stress, when she says, I had mixed feelings, she does a classic stress move. She touches her brow, even though we can't see a furrow. It is a beautiful move. So it tells you that even though she's not showing it, it's there. There's some stress. We work from a baseline. And when I say a baseline, I mean what we are seeing as normal and looking for stress moments when a person should change. So we want to look and see what's going to change as she goes through. Let's start off by saying her resting face looks disapproving. She has her lips pursed forward, and we associate pursed lips with disapproval of things. And then she shows even though you don't see the wrinkling of the brow, you can see the brow rise as she's talking about his heart rates and that. And then she touches that forehead. And all of these things are her. They're not us talking about what somebody else does. There's some emotional accessing when a person's looking down into their right. That's usually them thinking of emotional thoughts and moments when she says, we were with the wrong people. And then right out of the gate, she does something that I've not seen many guilty people do. Guilty people want you to trust them and feel endeared to them, maybe even feel pity for them that they've lost this person. She doesn't. She's not saying, look, we had a perfect relationship. She's saying, well, I was with him less time than there is now. That's not endearing. A person that is coming out and saying things like that is not afraid that you're going to judge them based on it. That is a powerful first move out of the gate for me. And that's an important one for her here that fundamentally changes what I saw in the others. Now, there's a problem because every guilty person you've seen behaves a certain way. Another person might come up and do it. But the biggest thing she's going to have a problem with is, did you find her likable? And I don't mean the four of us because we're looking for certain cues. But you, as you're watching her, do you find her likable? Because at the end of the day, what matters is what the jury believes and what she's doing when she's sitting there. And they are reading without the same qualifications, without the same background. And it's an important part of this. That's all I got.
You know what, though? I think that I think this is all set up to build this picture because she's sitting next to that attorney. I think they're trying to, from right out of the gate, trying to build this picture of this guy not being a good guy. I think their goal is to create something that makes the guy look bad.
But they don't do that throughout the whole interview. I get you, but they don't do that throughout the whole interview. They don't make it about his shortcomings. They make it about somebody else's, I think. And one of the things they do really well here is say, I don't have to know who did it. I just have to show you she didn't do it. That's a powerful tool.
Yeah. Yeah. It just makes me suspicious, though. I don't know.
But you're suspicious by nature.
3 years have now passed since John's death. How much do you think about him with everything else that is going on?
I think about him in terms of his final days, his final weeks. I mean, we have his cell phone, which a cell phone to anyone is like a diary, and it tracks everything you've done. And I've gone over and over his final movements, his heart rate, his injuries, the time that he did everything that day and the days leading up to it. But I've said this to other people. The time that I spent with John, 2 years, it's now been 3 since he's gone, since he was killed. And I'm a year beyond. I've eclipsed the time that I spent with him. And I have very mixed feelings, when I look back on John, because I see a lot of poor decisions that were all precursors to his death and to this nightmare that I'm living. It's
Poor decisions by whom?
by both of us. Just drinking, being around the wrong people is chief among them. Wrong people for the weeks leading up. They wouldn't have been people I would have chosen on my own to be around.
Karen, when the ARCA information came in that document dump, I guess, what was your emotion kind of reading what they decided?
I didn't really know the details of it until trial because I did not have the same access to those materials that the attorneys did because of the federal protective order. It was another moment, and there's been so many, that I realized, to put it mildly, how underhanded this prosecution is, that a district attorney can be privy to that accident reconstruction report and continue to pursue this case and not call Drs. Wolf and Rentschler.
Right. They have one job to do. They have one job to do, to seek the truth. They had this information in front of them. As Karen just said, why wouldn't they call them? They should have called them. Their only job is to seek the truth, not to seek a conviction. And the truth is, the physics don't lie. The car didn't hit John. He wasn't killed by being hit by a car. And they, not only did they not seek that truth, they tried to suppress it.
And their version of events was almost, it was laughable. It was laughable. It was illogical. It just did. The body just landed. The phone just landed. A side swipe with no bruises. It's not as if they had qualified, credentialed, advanced educated experts to offer another version of events. They didn't have that, and they chose to ignore that, and they chose to present to the court and to the public in a hearing that those federal materials, 3,000 pages, were 90 to 95% consistent with their theory of the case. The theory of the case is a car accident. The federal materials included a report that said there wasn't a car accident. That's the case. That's 95% of the case. And it was inconsistent. It wasn't just inconsistent. It was diametrically opposed to the Commonwealth's theory of the case or lie of the case.
All right, Mark, what do you got?
To your point earlier, Greg, the asymmetry in the face, whatever reason it's there for, is not going to play well to a jury. Now, there comes a point where there's sometimes there's no countermeasure to some extreme iterations of that asymmetry. But just you were saying, if you watching this, if you are there going, you know what, there's something that I don't like about her, check out the asymmetry, because that may be something that is baseline for her, and it doesn't look good because it's tough for the brain to understand asymmetry. Nature favors symmetry. It doesn't favor asymmetry at all. Therefore, we're going to like symmetry within some margins more than we're going to ever like asymmetry. What I like about this is both her and I don't know who the guy is.
Her
next door.
attorney.
It's her attorney. Okay.
Yeah.
They start to ramp each other up here. I think they kind of escalate each other unconsciously, I think, but try and match each other's energy and ramp up and match and ramp up until we get there wasn't a car accident. That's the case. And she is really quite adamant about that. The stress that she's putting there, really very adamant. We're not seeing on that any looks for approval, which would be the raised eyebrows. But then again, we're not seeing a lot of movement in the forehead for whatever reason that might be. And listen, if you know the good reasons for why that might be, I'm not going to speculate on it. I know the possibilities, but if you've got some actual evidence of that, or put your speculations down below in the chat. But no looks for approval, which is, you know, usually a good thing, but there may be some reasons why those eyebrows don't raise for approval. I certainly see in there wasn't a car accident. That's the case. I would see frustration, some anger, and a sense of unfairness there. Now, the fact that I'm seeing some anger, which is a tightness in the top lip there, and the eyes just narrowing slightly, the forehead coming down slightly, the head lowering, that's usually a good thing when somebody has some innocence, because it's usually pretty frustrating and anger making and feels very unfair if you're being accused something that you didn't do. So from what I can see here, there's some things going in her favor. Chase, what do you got on this one?
Yeah, I really agree with you. And this video here got me because this is where Karen shifts gears from defense mode to framing herself as this target of corruption. And all of y'all were nodding at the same time, so I thought, yeah, I must be on mute. I had to check.
No, you're actually correct.
So she's creating distance. She says, I didn't have access because of this protective order, whatever she says. She's laying this groundwork for plausible deniability. She's distancing herself from all this evidence. But she then says, I realized how underhanded this prosecution is or was. Now she's not just accused. Now she's betrayed by this system. There's kind of a Carl Jung talked about this a lot. I'm obsessed with Carl Jung. I own every book he's ever written in his life. He's written a whole lot of books. And he talks about this, how we're naturally drawn to archetypes and these story arcs. So we're definitely seeing some of that start coming out here. If you're a Jung fan, then you definitely saw it. But our attorney steps in. Their job is to seek the truth, not a conviction. That's the first thing I teach in interrogation. Like, you're not seeking confession, you're seeking truth. Because if you go in there looking for, I'm going to get this person to confess, not knowing whether or not they're guilty, you're an idiot. But there was something here that caught me. The physics don't lie. The car didn't hit John. You'll hear that phrase here in the clip. That's an absolute claim. And that claim is meant to just shut the door on debate right there. And she's not just kind of rejecting the case, she's discrediting a lot of that emotionally. And I think she's doing a great job of pulling the audience or a potential future jury toward her. And then she says it was the lie of the case, not the narrative or whatever. She says it was the lie of the case, but words like chose this and lie make this about intentional deception, not about errors. This is about intentional deception. So there's a moral alignment here, but if you hear someone stop defending facts and they start attacking motives with confidence and clarity, it's a sign that they're not just resisting, they're like they're repositioning their entire narrative here. And that's what's happening in this one video. You're seeing the whole narrative kind of take a big turn, which is a big deal. You don't see guilty people do this very often because they have a line that they have to stay on, like a little railroad track that they've got to stay on. You're not going to see them kind of take these turns, especially these emotional turns, and get pissed off like you're seeing in this video here. Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, really well prepared witness. If the attorney is what we're
Mm.
hearing, a really well prepared witness is not going to conjecture, not going to move off frame. To your point, Chase, they are not going to venture out. They're going to look for guidance. We don't see a lot of looking for guidance either, which is kind of interesting here. So maybe there's preparation as part of it. One of the more interesting things for me, when we did the first one, the reason I was on the fence is I said she looks uncertain about what actually happened. Well, she still looks uncertain about what actually happened, but she's now bolstered by using facts. And we know she's using facts, Mark, because of your point, no request for approval. Even if a person's Botoxed or some other reason in their forehead, their face is still going to open up. Their eyes are still going to move. And we don't see that. The other thing is we hear downward tone as she's telling you what's going on. That's what she believes or what she has come here to tell you. This is an interesting one because as she's on point, she's illustrating with her head. She's illustrating with her eyes. She'll blink her eyes or drive her head down as she's talking until she gets to that point where she is doing disbelief, where she's really wide-eyed, as they didn't call these two accident investigators that are the best in the country, supposedly. And she continues to illustrate with her head right after that. Then there's an outright smile of disbelief. And her hands come up to start really illustrating what she's talking about. Scott, to your point earlier, where she was not wildly illustrating with her hands, now she is. For obvious reasons, this is her primary defense. If there is no accident, she's innocent, period. I mean, that's easy. That's an easy argument. And it ties nicely back to the fish tastes like what it swims in. It ties nicely to a person who analyzes facts to come to conclusions. I've got the facts. They had these facts. They didn't use them, so they came to a different conclusion. I'm not surprised at all that she's bolstered by this evidence, and it looks like she is telling the truth, or she's at least saying what she knows, understands, and is prepared. Scott, what do you got?
Quite often, it's the upstairs against the downstairs. I think today it's going to be the upstairs and downstairs against the here in the corner.
You're going to end up edging more and more to the side.
Yeah, exactly. I'll be gone. Yeah, I have my own little room. Something's not right about this for me. It feels weird to me just from watching.
Yeah,
it.
very, very scientific language. Great. Yeah.
Yeah.
On board.
Yeah. It's just as girls talking. That's all that's going on at this point.
I don't trust her look.
But yeah, she just looks weird. All this is really is worded to strengthen that their new path that Chase is talking about. If we're going to go down the Jungian path, let's listen to that story, because as we go along, it envelops the entire thing, which makes sense, which is what you want to do. But watch that interaction between those two. Of course, he's the guy pulling the strings and in charge, and I'm sure telling her what to say is prepped her and everything. But when they connect like that, when he jumps in to add to what she missed in her delivery of the information when she gives her answer, before that she has this little thing of contempt. You can see it looks like contempt with me because, like you said, Mark, it's hard to tell what's going on her face. I mean, I've heard things where she may have a neurological situation happening. I don't know. But and then again, like Mark said, if you know, tell us in the comments down there. But she was asked what her emotion was about this. Doesn't talk about emotion when it comes to this. She's focused on this new way of telling the story. To me, it's got that feeling of somebody that said, "Okay, the first time didn't work. Let's change it and go down this road, this new road." And I think everything is turning that way. From what they're talking about, to the way she looks, the way she's got somebody with her now, the guy watching what she says and all that. So, but then again, I could be completely off base here, and this could just, this is a way of doing it. And some people do this all, every time they'll do it like this. We'll see how many people have we seen sitting with somebody else talking to them about that. But she doesn't talk about the emotion that he asks about. She talks about how ridiculous the findings were, which goes back to what everybody's been saying. And then again, he backs her up again. So I don't know. For me, it just sounds like something's not right here overall. So, and that's very technical to say it that way, like as you were saying, Chase.
Yeah.
But when things like this get to me, I don't know, man. Feels weird.
Something just tickling the old gallbladder in there. You can just
Chase,
Sounds
you
dirty.
know how Carl was able to write so many books? He was young when he started.
oh, that's good.
It's a great, more depth psychology jokes to come today.
Still no. Your head's bobbing.
Karen, when the ARCA information came in, that document dump, I guess, what was your emotion kind of reading what they decided?
I didn't really know the details of it until trial because I did not have the same access to those materials that the attorneys did because of the federal protective order. It was another moment, and there's been so many, that I realized, to put it mildly, how underhanded this prosecution is, that a district attorney can be privy to that accident reconstruction report and continue to pursue this case and not call Doctors Wolf and Rentschler.
Right. They have one job to do. They have one job to do, to seek the truth. They had this information in front of them. As Karen just said, why wouldn't they call them? They should have called them. Their only job is to seek the truth, not to seek a conviction. And the truth is, the physics don't lie. The car didn't hit John. He wasn't killed by being hit by a car. And they, not only did they not seek that truth, they tried to suppress it.
And their version of events was almost, it was laughable. It was laughable. It was illogical. It just did. The body just landed. The phone just landed. A side swipe with no bruises. It's not as if they had qualified, credentialed, advanced educated experts to counter, to offer another version of events. They didn't have that, and they chose to ignore that, and they chose to present to the court and to the public in a hearing that those federal materials, 3,000 pages, were 90 to 95% consistent with their theory of the case. The theory of the case is a car accident. The federal materials included a report that said there wasn't a car accident. That's the case. That's 95% of the case. And it was inconsistent. It wasn't just inconsistent. It was diametrically opposed to the Commonwealth's theory of the case, or lie of the case.
On the morning of January 29th, 2022, you said it was possible you might have hit John. How could that even be in the realm if you saw him going into the house?
Because it never crossed my mind that the people we were with, middle-aged adults with children, some of the children were with us that night at the bar. It did not cross my mind for several days that they did this to John, that John was treated like a piece of garbage. These were women and men, some I knew better than others, that I knew to be normal people. And I went through every possibility. He was near the road and he was dying. And I didn't think he was purposely put in that place.
In your opinion, there have been a few names that have surfaced in this third-party culpability theory. Who do you think, if John was beaten up and attacked in that house, who did it?
We don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know. And it's not for us to know. Somebody other than Karen is responsible for that, for the killing of John. But who it was specifically, others know. And they're not talking.
All right, Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, this is the same body language I saw in the last one, talking about the accident report. It's like it's a tangible theme. Her head and her face are illustrating. She's got good eye contact, breaks eye contact at times. She's not trying to hypnotize you with her eyes as she's talking to you. She makes a little bit longer eye contact than some folks, but I think that's just part of who she is. Maybe, again, related to what she does for a living and where she's at. There's a couple of things here that are interesting. The attorney stops her giving her opinion, and she lip compresses followed by pursed lips when he does that. And that, we associate lip compression with backing up, withholding information or emotion, and pursed lips with disapproval. But I think she realizes he did the right thing, because she would have called out someone's name, I think, and she stopped short of that. That's when he's asked who did it. And Chase, you talk about vanishing perpetrator, but I don't think that's what this is. She's not saying somebody did it. She's saying we know who did it.
Very clear.
And she's calling it out very aggressively. At the same time, she doesn't call a name out. And here's what the big thing to me is. I don't think they have to prove anything. I don't think they have to prove who did it. They just have to prove she didn't. And that's the big key here. And I think they're doing a pretty good job with that. But after he stops her, she looks locked down and contained, but her upper face looks like she wants to say something. You see that energy in her face. You can see all around her eyes lighting up. But she's still smart. She's sitting there locked down. And Scott, I'm sure you got a point about that, because she's too locked down. Something's wrong. What do you got?
Got something not feeling right in the old spleen?
Yeah, it's bothering me.
Is your rheumatiz acting?
My arms hurt when I do like that. She actually said she thinks she might have hit him. Remember that? They talked about that for a second. But all that sort of goes away, because when he asked her about that, how could it be even possible how could that be possible if she saw him go in the house? And what did she say about that? Not a whole lot. She says that she realized later that these people didn't like him, and so that's what made her start wondering what really happened. This, I don't know. So anyway, she tries to pull almost like this little magic trick of saying, I didn't know these people didn't like him. She hangs around this guy for 2 years, hangs out with his friends. And it's like when we're hanging around together, it's just us and our wives are with us, we act a whole lot different than we do if there's anybody else around. We're using different language. We're calling each other names. We're doing all kinds of things like that, and everything's fine. So when you have a bunch of guys together like that, even when their wives are out, they're all friends and things, she's going to notice that. She's going to see that if they don't like him, if they're doing that to him for real, if they're being mean to him, and she's not aware of it, then she's not very observant or isn't taking in that information, I don't think, when she should. But everything slows down when she talks about him being near the road and dying. Listen to how slow things get, because she's got to be very careful as she walks through this minefield, because he's just asked her about saying that she thinks that it's possible she could have hit him. So it's just, I don't know. That attorney bothers me too. So, not a whole lot of illustrating going on here either. There's a little bit, but not a whole lot. She's still locked down. And then when she locks eyes with that attorney, they lock eyes for a little bit too long, and she's smiling. So it's like, oh no, we both know something nobody else knows. It's like this little thing of intrigue and mystery she's throwing into it. You don't do that when you're being videoed and there's somebody sitting there asking you questions about that. That's off to me. And they just they lock eyes too long. They're looking at each other too long, which is letting us know that there's something else going on. That's too much. So, and then when he says, others know, but they're not talking. Hey, he's just being a little dramatic there, I think. It's just too much. It's too much for me. It's too TV-ish for me at this point. But her illustrating, again, like I said before, it's nominal. Her elbows never leave that chair. And she did it earlier, but her hands are clasped. I think it goes back to our original concept of she's locked down. She's locked down so she doesn't let anything leak out, So he's let her know she's under a microscope, and she's aware of that. But I think that's what's making this. Maybe that's probably what's making it feel weird. Maybe you're right, Greg. Maybe she's so locked down, it's making me feel weird about it. But just a bunch of things going on I don't feel good about. Chase, what do you got?
Yeah, I read a study titled People Looking at Each Other Too Long and Cues to Deception by Ronald McDonald a couple of years ago. It's insightful.
The Hamburglar tried to use that in his defense, but the Burger King judge said no, wouldn't let him use it. So I don't know how valid that information. I mean, I'm not saying it's not valid. I'm just saying I don't know how valid that information is at this point.
Yeah. I mean, it's not an exact science, but
no.
So right away, love you, man. I'm sorry.
Dude, lay into
You know you're going to get a beating.
3-1. I'm ready.
I took the side of Bigfoot before, so if you're watching this channel, it's your first video.
That's true.
Yeah.
I took the side of Bigfoot on, and I was the odd man out. So, all right. She introduces confusion here. She says, it never crossed my mind that people who we were with did this to John. Is this redirection? Yes. Linguistically, she dodges the core contradiction in this early statement. But if her nonverbals align, we have this furrowed brow, this tight jaw, this raised vocal intensity, it can suggest not deception, but cognitive dissonance, or maybe some delayed realization. People who are blindsided by betrayal or this kind of shock often, very often, struggle to repeat these past decisions in real time. And that is very common. And then we have this phrase, these were normal people with children. So really quick, on its face, this sounds like an excuse. But if her tone, her pace, her body language kind of show disbelief instead of rehearsed justification, she could be genuinely stunned here. So people can misread other people based on social optics, or what we call role assignment. If you're studying behavioral psychology, like I'm assigning a role based on somebody's middle class or they're 35 or whatever. So I don't think that's suspicious. I think it's just human. And then we have this kind of backfill reasoning where I didn't think he was purposely put there. This is a little bit of narrative stitching, to your point, Scott. But again, her delivery feels raw. It looks raw instead of calculated. We have increased blink rate, which is a stress indicator. This means we're blinking more often than some kind of a baseline. We have audible stress that you can hear in the video. The posture gets rigid, which is a change, and this all becomes a cluster of behavior. This might be emotional honesty, trying to kind of organize a bunch of trauma instead of deception. When you interview survivors of any kind of crazy crap that happens, they usually retell events with evolving emotional logic. Pay attention to that every time. The emotional logic evolves over time. And it's not because they're lying, it's because they're still unpacking that crap.
They have to unravel confusion. Agreed 100% on that. Yep.
Yeah. And I think the attorney says somebody other than Karen is responsible, or words to that effect. This line is strategic, absolutely, but strategic does not mean deceptive. Prepping a witness doesn't mean they're lying. If you're innocent and you decide not to get prepped to go to a deposition, you're a moron. You should get preparation. You should prepare for things like this. So this allows Karen to kind of stay in her little space here while her lawyer delivers this kind of controlled aggression and this accusation. If she's showing this visible anger, this could be some fury instead of avoidance here. So really quickly, I will say, don't isolate verbal indicators. A lot of people do this. This is what they said. Look at the alignment between language and the body. A person concealing guilt controls emotion, locks it down. A person that's reliving some kind of betrayal or trauma can't control it. And that's where the truth is there. It's in the messiness. And when you see the messiness, it's less likely to be deception. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah. Well, I think you're right. She possibly could tell the story of what she knows, or give information or not give information which creates doubt. And I think that's what's happening here between her and her lawyer. There's an element of setting up doubt. So to your point, Scott, it is asked, you said you could have hit him. How could you have hit him if you saw him going into the house? You're absolutely right. It's a straight question. It's a reasonable question. And you would reasonably go, here's exactly why that's the case. What she does is move our vision to a whole bunch of middle-aged adults in a bar with children, and sets up, just as you were saying, Chase, this idea of this is already a bit off. We've already got adults doing things with their children or exposing their children in a way that we're going to say is possibly not, is being set up as not being normal. Whether it's normal or not, it's question. There's a question there. Is that normal? Is that all right? Is that okay? She's not saying, oh, it's okay. That was okay, by the way. She's not saying it wasn't okay. She's got an intonation that says we should probably question that. Then she's clear. She's clear. They did this. They did this. Well, that's a clear accusation now. Who are they? Well, she says men and women. some I knew better than others. So there's now some reason why she wouldn't have known that they were a bad lot in the first place, because maybe some are worse than others, and therefore she wasn't really focused on the people that turned out to look like normal people in the first place and then turn out to be abnormal in some way. And so I think in this story here, she's managed to turn on our heads. People who you think at first glance are okay, they turn out not to be okay. Well, we know that's true. We've all had those situations. We thought these people are okay. They turned out not to be okay. So we can only agree with that. Sometimes in life, people who you think are okay turn out to be not okay. Now, none of that is a reason for, you said you could have hit him. How could you have hit him if you saw him going into the house? If I just said, well, because people who you think are normal in the first place turn out not to be good. So you go, no, answer the question. But she's really nicely maneuvered from giving that question. And then there's doubt, but no accusation. Like what are the names of those people? So there's set up doubt, there's no accusation. And then it said, it's not for us to know. It's not for us to know. Now, normally, I would say, hang on, if you are innocent, you're going to go, what I most want to know is what happened in that house. Like, I'm getting down to it. I want to know what happened, who is responsible, how my partner died, because I want justice, that they must be served, my partner must be served justice. Now, there's that world. And then there's the world where potentially you didn't do anything, but all you want to do is walk away without a murder or a manslaughter charge. And in that situation, you probably can or have to go, well, actually, we don't need to know what happened in there. All we need to know is that it wasn't me. That's all you need to know. For me to walk away free, that's all you need to know. So for me, video 3 now, we got a couple of worlds. We got the world of the murder. We've got the world of or this person dying, being found, dead with some blows to them. And we've got somebody who needs to walk away without a sentence, either because they're guilty or not guilty, but they want to walk away without a sentence. And these two worlds are not going to give us, in my mind, potentially the same story. And that, for me, could feel off during this. Greg?
Well, the other thing is, if you ask that question and she answered like she would have the very first time, she would have said, I'm not certain.
Yeah.
That's gone because she had that report that says there's no way he was hit by a vehicle. So now she's got some certainty to anchor her story. It changes everything. We always talk about every time you open a memory, you edit it. And the more data you get, this is like a war story. If Chase and I are both in the same exact situation, but from different vantage points, and then we talk about it later, then we understand the story differently. So I'm not surprised. It's
And your world A, Mark. Oh, sorry, Chase, go ahead.
And if you were thinking of the same movie quote as me when Mark was talking about having kids in a bar, put that in the comments.
Okay.
Because you're probably my people.
But you know what? Let's talk about that bar for a minute. She makes it sound like it was a bar, like Billy Bob Thornton goes to, and one of those things he does where it's just him and everybody's all, But what if it's like an Applebee's and the bar's like over there and it's a restaurant at the same time? I think
it was a bar. I think it was a bar.
Oh, is it just a bar?
But they were in more than one. And I think one of them for sure was a bar.
I'm still going with Mark's first story there. You got two situations, Mark. I'm going with the first one. So, yeah. Oh, well.
On the morning of January 29th, 2022, you said it was possible you might have hit John. How could that even be in the realm if you saw him going into the house?
Because it never crossed my mind that the people we were with, middle-aged adults with children, some of the children were with us that night at the bar. It did not cross my mind for several days that they did this to John, that John was treated like a piece of garbage. These were women and men, some I knew better than others, that I knew to be normal people. And I went through every possibility. He was near the road and he was dying. And I didn't think he was purposely put in that place.
In your opinion, there have been a few names that have surfaced in this third-party culpability theory. Who do you think, if John was beaten up and attacked in that house, who did it?
We don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know. And it's not for us to know. Somebody other than Karen is responsible for that, for the killing of John. But who it was specifically, others know. And they're not talking.
What is the most important piece of evidence that exists in this case that people could look at and say, hey, there's no way that she could have done this? Is there one thing?
To me, there is. That the only physical evidence connecting me to where John's body was found, which I will not call the crime scene, the only physical evidence, pieces of plastic taillight, were not found until after the state police had possession of that very taillight.
And when you couple that, you're looking for one thing. When you couple that with the testimony of the experts, the third-party, absolutely qualified experts, that there was no car accident. The car did not hit John, and John was not hit by a car.
So the taillight pieces, when they were found and when your car was taken, to you, that is the most crucial element of your defense.
It's closely followed by other evidence, but to me, yes.
All right, Chase, what do you got?
Some genuine anger, genuine contempt right here. So she says, the only physical evidence was found after the police had possession of the taillight. This is clear insinuation of evidence planting. And it's backed by very clear, strong nonverbal cues. There's visible anger, visible contempt, vocal intensity. But instead of openly accusing, she presents facts and lets the audience connect the dots. You always want the audience or the jury to feel clever. If you're an attorney, please write that down. That's the first thing when I train attorneys. How can we get the audience to feel clever, like they're connecting the dots? Because when you get an idea that someone thinks they generated from within their own head, they never disagree with it because it came from within. Why doesn't she say I was framed? There could be some legal constraints. Accusing police of corruption and all that stuff could be crazy. Could be credibility management. Maybe she's, maybe direct accusations risk sounding paranoid and makes her sound, she wants to sound measured while kind of signaling this corruption. So keep in mind, you want juries in the audience to put the dots together themselves. So with the psychological hesitation there, even if she believes it, saying the corruption is there out loud might still feel risky or really surreal. So that hesitation can be real, even in innocent people. So I think right here, there's emotional congruence. She's controlling the terms that she's using as an innocent person would, or maybe a guilty person would. So a lot of this behavior that we see, like there's preparation, all this stuff, innocent people should do that too, especially after 3 years. I think it's been 2 or 3 years she's been on trial. She believes she's been wronged and her emotions are real here. So if somebody lays out every piece of the puzzle, but doesn't say the picture, it's rarely random. It's not very often that you see that. They're balancing truth with some risk there, and they're trying to win without stepping on some kind of a tripwire. So keep that in mind. If they're laying out all these pieces and your brain puts this stuff together, that may be an influence strategy at work. Scott, what do you got?
All right. I'm not seeing any stress here from being falsely accused of killing her boyfriend. I mean, I am seeing the anger, but I think that's come from maybe something else. I don't know. but she's not acting like she should, in my opinion, the way she should act if she's been accused of this. And she's not coming out saying, wait a minute, let me tell you, I didn't do this. Never once do we see that. We don't see anything as far as emotionally in her expressions, whether she can express these or not, I don't know, on her face, like we talked about earlier from a neurological situation. There's no grief. There's no sadness. There's nothing like that in there. We're talking about somebody that you knew that well and they're not here anymore. They've passed away. There's going to be something in there. There's no panic and no uncomfortable moments really. And I think they've moved into attack mode here to attack this cabal that's against her and trying to make her look guilty. So I know I'm wording that from my own point of view, from my own. I don't know. That's the feeling I get anyway. But it's been years since it's happened and all that, but still the confidence is odd here, even though it's been a couple of years. It just seems off to me. Something doesn't seem right. She's still locked down pretty much. She hadn't come out of the little box yet, the little invisible box, and she's so locked down. Her arms are staying on that chair. Her elbows are on that chair. So I think, I don't know. I get the feeling something's up here, fellas. I don't know. Mark, did you go already?
No.
Okay.
I shall go. Yeah, I agree. She is locked down. There's some asymmetrical baton gestures as she conducts along to the rhythm of her speech. Okay, my main problem with this is, so I agree, Chase, she is adamant about not found until state police had possession of that tail light. She's so adamant about it that she stresses absolutely every word that she says. So the subject, the object, the action all have the same stress on them. Now, I think that's because she is adamant about that defense, like it's a good defense, and she needs the public to understand absolutely every point of that defense, the subject, the content of it, the object, the action of it, because as you rightly say, they will then be able to take those pieces, whatever piece they like, and go, oh, I see, state police, oh, possession, oh, tail light, not found. They'll be able to, if she loses any stress on any element of it, then they won't be able to piece this together and go, there's been a conspiracy by a cabal of as you say, Scott, of nefarious law officers in that particular county. Yeah. And so there's too much stress on everything. So I would say this is adamant about the defense, but I don't think it's adamant about the truth of it. Because if it were that, I think she would land more solidly on one of those things, either found or state police or possession or tail light. And they're all landed on the same.
Exhibit A.
Yeah, my lad. I rest Scott's case, Greg.
Yeah, but you can't have it both ways. She can't either be too locked down or too moving.
Right.
So somewhere in here, we got to figure out what's going on. And I think we see her rise and actually start to illustrate. To your point, she may hit on every point, as she says exactly everything. Maybe that's her animated most defense. I don't know.
Oh,
But
Greg, no, I'm not saying she animates with her gestures. She doesn't. She hits stress vocally.
on every word, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she does her hands do the downward telling at the same time. I listen for the tone, Mark. I would be, if she's lilting and up, I would listen to a little bit more carefully. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that there's more movement. She is moving more. There's disdain. You can't miss it. I mean, even more than her usual. And I think part of that disdain we see in her face is a baseline, that kind of data intake thing she does with a kind of awkward face shape is probably baseline. So it's hard to tell if it's disdain or not. The one I'm surprised you didn't hop on, Scott, is the one great indicator is she does a little head wobble. But I think the head wobble is very specific. If I go back and look at your anger and contempt, the things you guys have already brought up, I'll leave alone. That head wobble, when she says, I think it is, when she rotates her head that way, it's a give or take, what the hell ever, because she says it is, what does she say? Her exact words are something like, or other evidence. So it's not just one piece of evidence, it's a whole bunch of stuff. So her head is illustrating what she's saying too. So it all kind of comes together for me, whether you feel comfortable with what she's doing or not. I think she's showing disdain and lack of trust. And if she'd done this in the first interview, we probably would have felt differently in the first interview than we do now. Scott, you might not have, because you might still have felt uncertain. But what I'm seeing here is a fairly consistent set of body language that supports whatever the message is. And as for how much emotion she's showing, I don't know a good enough baseline to say, is she cold and unemotional all the time? I don't know. You know, she's in the business of being an analyst. She may be very accustomed to being very contained and having an opinion only when she's got lots of facts. So I'll just say still good enough for me at the moment.
All right.
I tend to trust it. You know, every time Scott's bunion flares up, hey, you've got one of these issues.
And look, I mean, the stuff she's doing, of course you can say she's shifted gears and saying somebody else did it. But if you didn't know exactly what happened and you were uncertain and there was a body lying in the snow where you were close to in the past, and then they came back and told you there's taillight pieces and you can't remember the night, you fill in the blanks one way. If you get a different set of data later, you fill in the blanks another way, because all those blanks are still there. That's the key for me.
It's coming around, Mark. Now let's talk about Greg's cough for a minute. I had the flu for 2 weeks. And I was so bad on one of these shows, I couldn't even do anything. I just sat around over here like this and coughed and wore a hat. Greg has coughed like 3 times and he's only had this thing a week.
Yeah, well,
So we need to get your DNA looked at. Make sure not a,
it's not DNA. You know what it is?
what?
I've probably had every vaccine. Jason, I've probably had every vaccine that any animal's ever heard of before.
Yeah.
And
They
you're
test-
around dirt and horses and dogs and
Exactly. And they test it on us before they give it to animals. So
What is the most important piece of evidence that exists in this case that people could look at and say, hey, there's no way that she could have done this? Is there one thing?
To me, there is. That the only physical evidence connecting me to where John's body was found, which I will not call the crime scene, the only physical evidence, pieces of plastic taillight, were not found until after the state police had possession of that very taillight.
And when you couple that, you're looking for one thing. When you couple that with the testimony of the experts, the third-party, absolutely qualified experts, that there was no car accident. The car did not hit John, and John was not hit by a car.
So the taillight pieces, when they were found and when your car was taken, to you, that is the most crucial element of your defense.
It's closely followed by other evidence, but to me, yes.
I think I ask your parents the same question. If you're framed, someone's got to run that, direct that. Who is that person?
I think you know who that person is. I think there's people who are enabling, and there's people who are actually moving pieces.
But is your theory that it's people inside that house, 34 Fairview, who sort of called the shots from the beginning, or someone high up in law enforcement?
I don't know the interconnections, the interpersonal relationships among these people. I have a strong personal opinion that what has motivated this persecution of me is power. There were familiarities among players that never should have happened. There's a sleeve of homicide in the Norfolk DA's office, as there is in the other counties of Massachusetts. And yet the person assigned to investigate this case, ostensibly investigate this case, lives a mile down the street from the crime scene. But I believe the players with the most influence are motivated more by power and playing God. And they're trying to play God with my life.
Not to protect people.
People are being protected. I don't know if the motivation was actually to protect those people, but it's a byproduct of it. I mean, there are names, and we know those names, that were hidden from me. I only knew who was in that house from the rumor mill, from people I knew in Canton, and it ended up becoming true once we pushed and filed motions and flew the team in. And 2 years later, a year and a half later, we're getting police reports of names of people that were in that house that I did not know about, or they were trying to make sure I didn't know about early in 2022.
All right, Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, lovely. I just noticed there's a sleeve of homicide. That is work talk. The place that she works at will talk about sleeves. Sleeve of this investment, sleeve of that investment. It's like the full jacket, and then you've got a sleeve of it, which just deals with a certain style of or type of investment. It's wonderful to hear. And I guess without knowing that, you go, why are you talking about a sleeve of homicide? What a strange metaphor. But it's a metaphor that's used in her work a lot. Also, we get the word ostensibly. Ostensibly. Aren't many people on the planet who will fit ostensibly into a sentence, and she manages to do it. It's beautifully done. So interesting linguistics going on. On the person assigned to investigate this case, ostensibly investigate this case, she says, there's definite anger there, anger on that one. There's clearly needing to set up doubt and intrigue. There were people in that house. Asked, who do you think did it? I think you know that. So setting up intrigue and doubt all the time. Now, of course, we can understand some reasons why she doesn't want to or can't or shouldn't blatantly accuse somebody. I can think of a number of reasons, but it does play into the intrigue and the doubt. And I think there's a good reason. And we'll hear about that on I believe, our next video as to why exactly this intrigue and doubt needs to be set up in this particular interview. They wanted to make sure I did not know about. There were people in that house they wanted to make sure I didn't know about, and there's anger on that. So on the one hand over here, we've got setting up the story of intrigue and doubt and not saying anything but saying so much. And on the other side, we have emotions of anger, as far as I can see, which is exactly what we should be seeing if somebody has been wrongly, unfairly accused. So still, we got this interesting little balance here. Greg, what do you got on this one?
Go back to what Chase was talking about epiphany, how people come to put things together themselves. That works in all walks of life, guys. I don't care what you're doing. I did change management for corporations forever. When you tell someone, you get nowhere. When you give them enough data for them to create their own solution, it's also simpler. There actually is the prefrontal cortex does not like change and creates all kinds of stress and stress hormones. But if you come to resolution on your own and plug it into your own little brain, you don't have all those stress hormones. So when you're doing change management, it's the approach you take. You talk to somebody, you ask them enough questions, they realize. So there's a reason, I think, they are not saying, here's what happened. Here's what happened. They did this. That's reason one. Reason two is now you're probably going to step on a tripwire and get yourself in some kind of legal trouble because you're saying there's corruption inside this department that you can't prove. Now, that becomes another thing. So I'd be very careful assigning any blame because of that. Mark, to your point, she does show all the things I expect to see. Let's go back and look at her smile of disbelief. It's there again. Look at that illustrating with her head. It's there again. Same eye contact. She's talking about a theory, so there's no right or wrong. And her baseline is the same as it was earlier. Early in the game, we nailed down these same things. This is the answer when they ask her about the person and she says, I think you know who, and she's going at it. You can see there's the answer she wanted to give earlier because the upper part of her face, when she was so contained, is doing exactly the same thing. Go back and watch video. I think it was video 2 or 3. And that smile and eye movement down and to the right is because she's thinking about somebody she's got animosity for. That's emotion. When she drops her eyes down into her right, that's emotion. And she's thinking about the person she's got animosity for. I think she's pretty clear here. And she could be pretty aggressive if it were not for probably the guy sitting next to her saying, don't say anything stupid, would be my guess. Scott, what do you got?
I agree with you. She's locked down. He's locked her down and said, don't you dare say that, because that's going to open up a can of worms. We can't, it's going to be hard to get all the worms back in the can once they climb out. But at the same time, it's a little bit weak to even say that, for her to say that. So this is, she says that, and she lays out this shotgun pattern of about power and people being in control and all these people that are talking about it. I've clicked into interrogation mode where I've already uh, uh, set my head toward where I'm headed for this. That's why I think I'm approaching it this way, and not looking at the clinical side of it as much, because I think I'm ready to go. I think I'd be ready to go talk to her, because I think for me, I feel like there's a lot happening here that shouldn't be, and I think that was one of them. I'm not going to say anything else because I'll be shooting my mouth off, and then when they find her not guilty and they can prove it, I want to look like an idiot. So, Chase, what do you got?
Yeah, I'm going to cover 5 points here. 5 points. You can take it or leave it. Here we go. Point number 1, she implies direction behind this setup, but she doesn't name names. And I think that's discipline, not evasion. I do not think that's evasion. I think that is a discipline. She's angry, but not erratic. People that are fabricating narratives typically overreach, like almost universally. They typically will overstep or overreach. She doesn't do that. Point number 2, instead of overclaiming, and this is when she's talking about, I don't know the interconnections and all this stuff. Instead of overclaiming, which we see a lot in guilty people, she admits what she doesn't know. So that restraint, in my opinion, is major credibility. Honest people qualify, deceptive people fake certainty, in my experience, as a very general rule. Point number 3, they're trying to play God with my life. People are being protected, blah, blah, blah. She stays focused on power and control, not vendettas and cover-ups. That kind of framing reflects, I think, some very clear thinking. I don't think that's reflective of an emotional reaction right here. Point number 4, she does not plead for sympathy, seek emotional rapport, or lash out at individual people. That's kind of a big deal to me. Those are all behaviors that are common in deception, guilty people. Instead, she is frustrated, focused, clear. These are hallmarks of genuine grievance and not performance to me. Point number 5, right here, she doesn't claim secret knowledge. Right? Big deal. She credits this legal process for revealing the truth, not herself. It's the legal process. And that shows that she's seeking facts instead of fabricating them. I think this one clip here was pretty big. It shows a lot of indicators. Not that we can tell, 100% she's guilty. Anybody who says that on the internet, that you can tell that by body language and behavior, is a moron, is a total idiot. Unless there's like
or an expert, depending on who you ask.
Oh, yeah. So truthful people, when they're under pressure, they stay focused and irritated, not theatrical. So when somebody fights uphill and without reacting for sympathy or scapegoats, and their story keeps aligning with revealed facts, you're oftentimes looking at real innocence, not rehearsed defense. And I'm saying it very much looks like that from this clip, what I see. Am I the last one?
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, that was good. That was really good. Yeah. I think Sadie will give you an award just for that one. That'll be the one that she uses as the example.
I think ask your parents the same question. If you're framed, someone's got to run that, direct that. Who is that person?
I think you know who that person is. I think there's people who are enabling, and there's people who are actually moving pieces.
But is your theory that it's people inside that house, 34 Fairview, who sort of called the shots from the beginning, or someone high up in law enforcement?
I don't know the interconnections, the interpersonal relationships among these people. I have a strong personal opinion that what has motivated this persecution of me is power. There were familiarities among players that never should have happened. There's a sleeve of homicide in the Norfolk DA's office, as there is in the other counties of Massachusetts. And yet the person assigned to investigate this case, ostensibly investigate this case, lives a mile down the street from the crime scene. But I believe the players with the most influence are motivated more by power and playing God. And they're trying to play God with my life.
Not to protect people.
People are being protected. I don't know if the motivation was actually to protect those people, but it's a byproduct of it. I mean, there are names, and we know those names, that were hidden from me. I only knew who was in that house from the rumor mill, from people I knew in Canton, and it ended up becoming true once we pushed and filed motions and flew the team in. And 2 years later, a year and a half later, we're getting police reports of names of people that were in that house that I did not know about, or they were trying to make sure I didn't know about early in 2022.
Karen, would you like to see this case tried somewhere else? Moved out of Norfolk County, moved out of Massachusetts?
I'm not afraid of this case being tried in Norfolk County. I'm agnostic.
In terms of picking a jury for the next trial, I mean, it was a challenge the first time around. How the heck do you do it this time?
We're not looking for jurors that haven't heard about the case. That's going to be impossible. We're looking for jurors that haven't formed an opinion about the case, which is possible. And they may have, I know there are people in the jury pool that have maybe heard about the case tangentially or know my face or passed by it on the dial, but don't really know the evidence. I'm optimistic that those people exist and they'll hear the evidence and they'll see the truth. But I believe people in Norfolk County, I've seen it, and I'm not from Norfolk County. I didn't live there. I wasn't raised there, but they're smart and savvy and they're passionate. And when they do hear about the case, most of my supporters, I would guess, are from Norfolk County proportionately, and they're intelligent. They see this for what it is by following the evidence really closely. So I just need jurors that'll do that. I haven't done it yet, but will be willing to do that.
You've spoken at length about this case and the circumstances that have happened. Why not take the stand?
I am not saying that I am not taking the stand. I felt confident in our case, in our defense, because a lot of our case was our cross-examination of these witnesses. And we made a game time decision, and I take the advice of my attorneys, but I'm not afraid of taking the stand. And I'm clearly not afraid of speaking, but I will not assign any genuine, truthful intentions to the prosecution. And I've already seen signs they're playing hardball. So we'll weigh the pros and cons, and we'll make another second game time decision.
But since they're talking about jury selection, voir dire, some people call it voyeur dire, but it's voir dire. Did we tell that story, Chase, about when me and you were doing that? The guy said it. Okay. Said he was racist
That's
to the
funny.
judge.
That's crazy.
Wow. All right, Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, I would say this is disdain in her, but it's tough because she does it a lot. But it's more pronounced here. It could still be disdain in general. She could be in a situation where at this point she's got disdain for the entire situation. But that withdrawal of sides of the mouth often is disdain for a situation or whatever. When they ask her about the opinion of the case, it's really interesting. She goes to one eye closed, an inhale of exasperation. Her head moves to the right and left, almost like to say imbalance. And then she started followed by talking about what's possible. All that looks good and right. All that is body language punctuating what the brain is thinking. And that doing this, if a person's doing that, they probably have not practiced that moving their head back and forth to say imbalance, that closing the eye to critique.
But dude, if that was trained and practiced,
Bingo, damn
Chef's
good.
kiss.
She's good. Hey, if that was, we need to and we could get her on here. I'd love to know how she did it, because that's pretty powerful. That is powerful body language that we don't typically think of doing. So it's interesting to watch. And then all this looks good and right. My guess is it's up to the attorney whether she takes a stand or not. And I would say she's just got to be really careful, because people expect one thing and she doesn't deliver it, she loses. People don't expect something, she does deliver it, she loses. This is a tough one. I was talking to Barnes about that one day, and what he suggests, and he says often he will say, do not take the stand, you can't win. So, I mean, we have to get him on here to say what he had to say about her, but
We should do
she-
that.
yeah, and I'd love to have him on. He'd be good for that,
Yeah.
to talk about this one. But she looked a bit surprised by the question about whether she would take the stand or not, or whether she was feeling good about that county. And look at her, then she starts to halt. This is all good, because her language about what she's actually thinking. You see her face look surprised by the question, and then have to think through the words for the question, slowing down her cadence, changing her rate of literacy. That's all good. That means she's actually thinking, and she was surprised. If she's faked all this, I'm impressed. How about you, Chase?
Yeah, I'm very impressed. I've got 4 points I'm going to cover on this one here. And yeah, 4 points. Point number 1, she's talking about this being held in Norfolk. Here in Virginia, we have a town called Norfolk, except everybody pronounces it Norfolk. It's bizarre. But she's not trying to distance herself or escape some kind of scrutiny. That kind of neutrality shows, in my heart, she's not afraid of where the trial happens. And that's a huge green flag for me. People who are guilty usually want to get the hell out of town real quick. Point number 2, she's talking about people who've heard of the case or haven't made up their mind. This is refreshingly real to me. She knows the case is high profile. She's asking for fairness instead of fantasy. And it sounds like someone thinking clearly instead of someone trying to slip a card into the deck here. The one-sided smile and head tilt. Let's talk about this. I've noticed it's more common, the one-sided smile, when someone's tilting their head. In my experience, I can't back this up with any research, so keep that in mind. 30,000, 35,000 hours I've been doing this. I've noticed it's more common, and I've also noticed it's more common, this one-sided smile, in people that are on the East Coast. It's an East Coast gesture that's more common. You look at the movie Grease. You look at the actors that were from that era, when they want to look cool, they do that kind of one-sided smile. Look at Elvis. So I think it's just how she expresses herself. I don't think it's contempt, in my opinion. I don't see any red flags there. Point number 3, people from Norfolk, she says they're intelligent. She gets caught up here, a pause. There's a crack in her voice, and there's some facial tension here. And that kind of slip usually is not deception. I think it's real emotion. I think she's feeling the weight of that moment. I don't think she's performing it, in my opinion. Point 4, she's not dodging or blaming here when she's saying, I'm not afraid of taking the stand. I think she explains the strategy. I think she owns the choice. I think she keeps her tone is very steady. And that's what real ownership under pressure looks like. She's direct, she's sharp and composed. She's clearly angry, but in control. That's a big point to me. She's not lashing out, no theatrics. I think it's a big indicator of someone speaking from conviction instead of fear. So keep in mind, if you're ever talking to somebody, the more pressure that somebody's under, the more the truth leaks through. And it's not always in what they say, but how they hold themselves while they're saying it. The cracks that we see here, to me and Karen, feel human instead of tactical. And that is, as Greg, you were saying a second ago, that is incredibly hard to fake, even for an actor. And I think it's even harder to sustain across interviews and across multiple news appearances like she's done here. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so I would agree. Let me give you some evidence that backs that up. I think she's using her analyst daily language. She uses the word agnostic. That is not, agnostic doesn't come into most people's vocabulary. It's tough usually to come up with that term in financial analysis and for portfolio managers. Being agnostic is a common term. Like sleeve would be used, like ostensibly would be used. So there's all these interesting, well, we might say idiolectical elements.
You can't just make up words, Mark.
Well, maybe I did, maybe I didn't. They'll check. They'll fact check me below. They'll fact check me below, and they can.
You can't just quillerm like that, Mark. Quillerming is not allowed here.
I'll use it again. There are many idiolectical elements. Let's see. Complain down below.
It sounds
By the way, you know, Shakespeare made up most of the language. Most of the language, just make stuff up, and it became common parlance amongst the British and then the rest of the world. So if I did make something up, I frankly don't care. Frankly, don't care.
You're British.
I'm British. It's a Monday. It's a Tuesday. Yeah, it's a Tuesday. Why not? It's a Tuesday. So agnostic is used. That for me is a good sign, because she's using common language when she's in her daily work, being intellectual, having to think about it, but you know, common vocabulary for her. Not afraid of this case being tried in Norfolk County. There is this strange closing of the one eye. I don't believe that's about having false eyelashes and the glue having come off it. I don't think she's wearing false eyelashes. So there is this weird close, and with the asymmetry in the face, which is a baseline for her anyway. But with that closing of the eye, I start to think about cynicism. And so we'll come back to that in a second, because we get looking for jurors who haven't formed an opinion of the case, and we get that closing of one eye again on opinion. Looks cynical to me. Well, you know, the cynicism is not really trusting the system. So there can be an element of contempt within cynicism. So, you know, at the same time as you being correct there, Chase, that look, she's going, do this wherever. If there is a conspiracy against her, the last place you'd want to do it is where that conspiracy can take hold and has power. So is there a possibility that there is some fear, because she does it on afraid? There's a move from baseline on afraid. So could there be an element of fear? It would be fair that she can say, hey, I'm not afraid, but actually be afraid of that. That would be reasonable. And looking for jurors who haven't formed an opinion. Well, isn't she kind of saying they're hard to find right now, especially as we're doing shows like this? Well, she's doing a show and we're doing a show about her show. So she's making it even harder to find anybody who won't be involved in this case. And so, or have some understanding or be prepped in some way about this case. And so I think there's an element here, has to be an element here of cynicism, in that, of course, you are prepping potential jurors to have a sense of, well, I wonder, there's a mystery here. I mean, maybe, you know, couldn't it? I mean, who was in the house? Who wasn't it? Like, and we don't need to know who they were. We just need to have the possibility and probability that it wasn't her, and then she's off, which may be justice, or maybe not. I frankly don't know. But there's an element. There would be an element of cynicism here, potentially. Of course, you are prepping the public. Greg, what are your thoughts?
Well, Mark, I think your cynicism remark is exactly what we see with one eye closed and the head going in balance. Look, whatever I get's what I get's what she's doing there. I mean, that's what I was saying. If she can do it that subtly, I'm impressed.
So, Mark, you don't think it's an MK Ultra glitch?
Well, I didn't want to bring that. That would be, you know, that will start off a whole can of worms that go into a whole different dimension. And once they're in that dimension, you cannot get that. The can isn't a can anymore. They're not even worms anymore. So it's like, no.
I think Scott is onto something, because he's got that specialized hearing from all those years of doing the different frequencies. He's hearing different.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
So.
Karen, would you like to see this case tried somewhere else? Moved out of Norfolk County, moved out of Massachusetts?
I'm not afraid of this case being tried in Norfolk County. I'm agnostic.
In terms of picking a jury for the next trial, I mean, it was a challenge the first time around. How the heck do you do it this time?
We're not looking for jurors that haven't heard about the case. That's going to be impossible. We're looking for jurors that haven't formed an opinion about the case, which is possible. And they may have, I know there are people in the jury pool that have maybe heard about the case tangentially or know my face or passed by it on the dial, but don't really know the evidence. I'm optimistic that those people exist and they'll hear the evidence and they'll see the truth. But I believe people in Norfolk County, I've seen it, and I'm not from Norfolk County. I didn't live there. I wasn't raised there, but they're smart and savvy and they're passionate. And when they do hear about the case, most of my supporters, I would guess, are from Norfolk County proportionately, and they're intelligent. They see this for what it is by following the evidence really closely. So I just need jurors that'll do that. I haven't done it yet, but will be willing to do that.
You've spoken at length about this case and the circumstances that have happened. Why not take the stand?
I am not saying that I am not taking the stand. I felt confident in our case, in our defense, because a lot of our case was our cross-examination of these witnesses. And we made a game time decision, and I take the advice of my attorneys, but I'm not afraid of taking the stand. And I'm clearly not afraid of speaking, but I will not assign any genuine, truthful intentions to the prosecution. And I've already seen signs they're playing hardball. So we'll weigh the pros and cons, and we'll make another second game time decision.
Something that the prosecution has recently been focused on were calls you made to your mother overnight. What were those calls about?
Anyone who spent any time with me throughout my life knows I'm incredibly close to my parents. And I was very troubled to put it. You've heard the voicemails. It was a blizzard. There were young children unattended. And John, uncharacteristically, and when I say uncharacteristically, I mean he's never done that before at that hour in those conditions. And I was panicked. I was torn between, did something go wrong, or is he purposely ignoring me and taking advantage of me to go home to the kids while he stay out drinking? And as I do, and do I wish I did it less? Yes, but now I need her more than ever. As I normally would do, I'd reach out to my mother for, what do you think's happening? And I, reach out to them every day now that night just, it's like I never woke up from it. So.
All right, Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so this, for me, completely sidesteps the question. What were those calls about? She goes through themes of her relationship to her parents, care of children, the behavior of John being abnormal, panicking, taken advantage of, needing support, and the whole thing being a nightmare. There's nothing about what the calls were actually about. There's no, well, I said this, they said this, here's
Right.
why this was done. It goes out into much bigger themes. There's probably some reason why. I can't think of that reason right now. This seems an unreasonable answer to a very straight question. But again, I go back to, there's her answer to a really straight question, and that won't help her case. And then there's what she goes into, which is relationship with parents, care of children, behavior of John, abnormal, panicked, taken advantage of, support system. It's all a nightmare. There's what will sow a narrative of doubt in that audience. And again, that's what we're playing with there. It's not a great answer on one hand. On the other hand, to start a defense, it's not a bad answer at all. Greg, what do you got on this one?
Yeah, a couple of things, Mark. I'm with you. She does a good job of doing exactly what she did when she was describing documents that were real, tangible, physical things. She's doing the same kind of baseline. However, there's one or two places that make me go, this is interesting. there's a place where she shows residual emotion around anger about her being taken advantage of by John. That's real. It's tangible. It's there. So the likelihood that she was ranting to her mother on the phone in a drunken state or whatever state she was in might be the reason. I'm not going to conjecture and say there might be an answer for your question. The real issue though is she does all of that and then she says, however, she says something. She uses the word so, which she has not used in the entire thing, to trail a thought. Right after that, her lips close tightly and she goes back to disdain. That makes you wonder what happened exactly on the phone calls with her mother that she may or may not want to be heard. And look, if they could say, she said, I think I hit him or something like that, it would be a different story because that's the next morning. But even if it's residual emotion and anger and she was ranting and screaming and yelling about something, which I've heard people say that she left voicemails for John, screaming, yelling at him, then of course people feel stupid for that. And you get all kinds of things to come out of it. So that's out of where that's an explanation. So is an explanation, but a deleted explanation usually. And if any of us were in the interrogation room, I said, so where were you on Tuesday? And the guy was, well, then I went out to the store. I picked up a couple of 6-packs. I went home. And so none of us would let that pass because that so is a verbal bridge to open up something else. But she gets away with it here. And it should have been an open-ended question right after that. So this is a little spooky, a little odd, a little something outside of the norm. Starts off good and ends poorly. Scott, what do you got?
All right. Anytime it takes you 40 seconds to pre-qualify your answer, something's up. Something's not right here. I'm telling you. So this answer was locked and loaded, man. They prepared this early. So whoever was doing the witness prep on this did a really good job. Whoever prepared for this, because that thing flows and it sounds fine. Everything's going really well. Because let's remember how she was at the very beginning, where she got a question where she didn't have the answer ready yet. How long it took her to structure that and how it was broken up. Not here. Everything's very fluid. Everything's just sort of flowing out. So she was ready for that one because they know how important it is. Because let's go back to when she was asked about, well, you said you think you might have hit him. And now when that night she's on the phone with her mom for a long time, that late at night, all, lit up, something's up. So I'll leave it there. Greg, what do you got? Oh, and Chase, what do you got?
Yeah. Let's go through these 4 points again. I got 4 points for this video as well. Point number 1, the chin jut. She does this chin jut when she's saying, anybody who knows me, I'm close to my parents. She changes the subject, but I would say if I'm innocent and I have a limited amount of time to go on national TV, I'm going to talk about exactly what the F I want to talk about. And that may be what we're seeing. I'm just throwing it out there. This chin jut, though, this is a confident, it's a primal move, exposing the throat. And it means that we're open to challenge. We're certain of truth. I don't think it's defiance. I think it's conviction is what we're seeing here. Point number 2, she's talking about, I was torn. Did something go wrong, or was he ignoring me? This is messy. It's human and it's vulnerable. She's not trying to clean that up. She's showing how it really felt, most likely. Liars, and write this one down if you're studying deception, liars simplify emotions. Truthful people will show contradictions when they talk about things. And that's what we're seeing here. Point 3 here. She's talking about, do I wish I did it less? Yes, but I need it, or stuff like that. But she admits to reaching out to her mom out of panic instead of strategy. There's not a lot of excuses here. Just self-awareness is what looks to be broadcasted here. And that kind of honesty under pressure is hard to fake, might have been rehearsed. Point number 4, she's like saying, it's like I never woke up from it. That strong lip purse right here, we typically say that's withholding, right? But there's no conglomeration. There's no huge cluster of things. I think she's holding back emotion. And I think right here, there's real pain, tightly contained. I don't think it's a rehearsed line in any way. So when somebody's holding back tears, instead of forcing them out. You're looking at most likely real emotion, especially when they're holding the emotion back. And when their story gets messier, not cleaner under pressure, that's usually where the truth lives. So if the pressure is getting put on and the story gets messier, in some instances, that's typically where you're seeing the truth. That's all I got. Was I last?
Yeah.
As always, I'm always last.
Something that the prosecution has recently been focused on were calls you made to your mother overnight. What were those calls about?
Anyone who spent any time with me throughout my life knows I'm incredibly close to my parents. And I was very troubled to put it. You've heard the voicemails. It was a blizzard. There were young children unattended. And John, uncharacteristically, and when I say uncharacteristically, I mean he's never done that before at that hour in those conditions. And I was panicked. I was torn between, did something go wrong, or is he purposely ignoring me and taking advantage of me to go home to the kids while he stay out drinking? And as I do, and do I wish I did it less? Yes, but now I need her more than ever. As I normally would do, I'd reach out to my mother for, what do you think's happening? And I, reach out to them every day now that that night just, it's like I never woke up from it. So.
All right. Well, we've taken a look at Karen's new video, and we've all made decisions about what we think we've seen. Mark, what are you seeing so far?
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, I'll go back to it. Look, there's two stories here, and what she's trying to get across, I believe, in this one is the one that will start to educate the audience around her and potential jurors, I would suggest, as to what the doubts might be before they even get into court. So she's potentially kind of a preceding of an idea here. Look, and the reality is if this is going to be a tricky one. If it weren't, somebody would be banged up already. So regardless of who's involved and how they're involved, this is a tricky one. And I think we understand that by this is a second go at this one. And that really doesn't happen a great deal. So look, we'll follow it and see where it goes. Chase, what did you see?
Yeah, if you ever want to read a master class, there's all these books out there on Amazon for how to seed ideas, there's a book called Persuasion by Bob Cialdini. The original masterwork of this is called Plato's Apology. That is the masterwork. This is written before Christianity. So that's where all of this comes from. And we're seeing a lot of very similar strategies from Plato here. If I'm the one bringing this up this time instead of Mark. So, sorry.
You know him well enough to call him Bob?
Yeah.
Wow. Is he a good guy?
He's a very, very good guy. Yeah.
Yeah. I got to meet that guy, man. It's a great book.
It is.
Sorry.
So I think Karen's I don't think she's performing innocence. I think she's surviving. And I think what looks like a bunch of coldness is most likely some focus. What sounds clinical here is probably a bunch of obsession from fighting for her life for probably 2 years, if she's innocent. I don't see a lot of dramatics. I don't see overreaching. I just see a woman who seems to be clinging to facts here like oxygen. Keep in mind, guilty people manage perception. Karen is managing evidence. And when the only thing that you trust is the truth, you don't sugarcoat it, you weaponize it. And she is doing that in this video. I don't know this case very well, but this behavior by itself looks like an innocent person. And I'll leave you with one final thing that you can write down, stick it on your fridge for the week. Guilty people do not obsess over the truth very often. Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, guilty people don't concern themselves with facts often. They are often the kind of people who are going to look over here. And so, Scott, I understand your concern with her locking things down. Confusion, maybe, whichever way you want to look at it. But what I would say is this: in the first time we looked at these videos, I said then there's a lot of uncertainty in her. That uncertainty could be caused by she doesn't know what happened because of alcohol the night before or whatever. What we don't see her doing here is coming back and filling in new facts that this happened differently. What she says is, I never thought to assume that somebody in the house could have done this, but the evidence shows that. Now you're talking about fish tastes like what a fish swims in. She is an analyst for Fidelity, or was an analyst for Fidelity. She works in facts that lead to conclusions. So you expect her to behave this way. And you also would expect that if those facts didn't support the conclusions and she's trying to persuade you they do, you would see dissonance, you would see some kind of issue, some clusters of behavior. She tried to mask that because in her life, she has to do that in her daily job, is to go in to say, I made this conclusion based on these facts. If she was BSing and making her way through it, you'd expect to see stress clusters. We don't. We see some really hard to imitate body language. That one mark, for example, around skepticism, that is powerful. When she closes one eye and does a little head bobble, that's powerful. And if I have not seen that, I might have a different feeling. The only place I saw anything that gave me any skepticism was around the call, and that could be around guilt for what she was saying and all that. So I agree with you, Chase. If I'm putting it flatly on the face of what I see, she looks like an innocent person. Scott, what do you got?
So, okay. It just doesn't look right to me from the very beginning, even up to the end. So to throw I'm not going to get deep into it because I know you all, after we're done here, we'll be on here for an hour telling me why I'm probably wrong. But I'll put an anthropomorphic tone on it and say, in my opinion, if it looks like a duck, talks like a duck, and walks like a duck, it's probably backed over its boyfriend. That's terrible. I should take that out, shouldn't I?
No, you should leave it.
I shouldn't say that. That's mean.
Well, you weren't talking about her. You were talking about a duck.
That's true too. That's
Yeah.
true too. I was talking about a duck.
Greg, my iCloud photo is of me doing that one eye gesture.
That's funny. That's funny.
Yeah.
That's funny.
You got to use better adhesive on your false eyelashes. That's the key, Chase.
Yeah.
That's true. That's true. Well, y'all turned on me.
At least you didn't run.
That's true. That's true.
But you still got to say it, though.
I know. Thanks for another good one, fellas. We'll see you next time.